I generally try to stay away from predictions just because I think it's a somewhat lazy trope to just sit down here each week and say, here's who's going to win, here's who's going to lose, or here's how you're going to bet, etc. Except for the college football playoff, those are the games that matter. Who cares how right you are about a random Mountain West game on a Thursday night in October? It's when push comes to shove that it's important. I think Notre Dame's going to beat the hell out of Penn State. I think the Orange Bowl is going to be a snoozer. The Fighting Irish are playing as well as anybody in America. And while I think Penn State might be just a little bit underrated, which I recognize is a stupid statement to make when you're talking about how badly they're going to be beaten. Because I think if you were to ask around, or I think general sentiment is that there are three teams who can win the national championship and then also Penn State. And while it's probably a fair-earned moniker, a fair-earned distinction that like, hey, Notre Dame, Texas, and Ohio State can win the title, and then there's Penn State. There's Penn State. I don't know how, even at this stage of the season, I don't know how good Penn State is. They lost to Ohio State, lost to Oregon, and then beat Boise State and beat SMU to get here. That was kind of it. And that's a bigger discussion for a different day on the college football front of like, hey, maybe the team should play more than like 4 important games to decide who's a champion. 5, 6 important games to decide who's champion, but that's neither here nor there. They haven't been tested, really, in the college football playoff. They backdoored their way into the Big Ten championship because Ohio State didn't handle their business. And while they put up a really good fight against an Oregon squad that was probably viewed as one of, if not the favorite to win the national championship, they did not beat them. And that's sort of been Penn State's issue under James Franklin. So they have not won the big game. Now, I'm not going to argue that the first round game against SMU and the quarterfinal game against Boise State aren't big games, because they absolutely undeniably are. And it's one of my giant pet peeves about people who use the they don't win big game argument, because a college football playoff game is a big game. And it was the same thing. Ryan Day doesn't win big games. Dude, Ryan Day went 2-1 in top 5 matchups this season. Games that are 2 teams that are in the top 5 are undeniably big games. Peyton Manning can't win the big game. Like, well, how the hell did he get to the AFC Championship game over and over and over again? Just because they won doesn't make them not big games. So that's off the exit ramp, back on. Penn State won 2 big games. They won the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State. They won a first-round game against SMU. Just because the opponent might have been quote-unquote inferior, or just because the opponent, or they had the easiest path to get to the semifinals, doesn't mean Penn State didn't win their way here. But even at this stage of the season, I don't know how good Penn State is. I don't know how consistent Penn State is. If you look at the things Notre Dame does really well, especially defensively, they stop the run. If you look at what Penn State does really well, it's run the football. They run the ball really well. They I don't think, have the playmakers outside to beat Penn State deep, to beat Penn State consistently. That in a 3rd and 7 at a pivotal spot where you are deciding what you're going to do, whether you're going to kick a field goal, whether you're going to go for it on 4th down, or whether you need to extend the drive to score touchdowns. I don't know that Penn State has that ability against Notre Dame to move the chains through the air over and over and over again. And offensively, I think Notre Dame is playing as well as they have been, and maybe as well as they could be playing, which is a whole different ball game. What I think, like, to me, Notre Dame's offense has the highest floor but the lowest ceiling. I don't think Notre Dame is going to be in a spot where they are hanging 40 against Penn State or Ohio State or Texas should they win. And I'm here to tell you that I think they will win somewhat handily. Notre Dame is going to win this game by 2 touchdowns or so in a similar fashion to how they beat Georgia, in a 28-10, a 31-17 type situation. When push comes to shove, and I recognize this is boiling it down, really reducing things, can Penn State outscore Notre Dame? In my opinion, the answer to that question is no. Penn State's best player, and I know that there are people who believe their best player is Tyler Warren, the tight end. It's not. It's Abdul Carter. Penn State's best player is Abdul Carter, and he is a game-time decision, according to James Franklin. James Franklin says, I think he's going to go, but we'll figure that out on Thursday night. Okay, that doesn't give you a lot of hope that he's going to be at 100% and be able to affect the game that I think Penn State needs him to be in a spot to affect the game. So when you put all of those things together, Notre Dame's offense is playing as well as it can. It is efficient as it can be. It does not have a super high ceiling. The Fighting Irish O is just not going to be an offense that is super like the Ohio State in the first half in the Rose Bowl is not really a possibility for Notre Dame. And that's not a bad thing. That's just who they are. That's how they're built. So Notre Dame offensively is playing as well as they can. Penn State has a history and a penchant under James Franklin of faltering in these big-time games. And despite the games with SMU and Boise State being big-time games, I don't think they are enough to dispel that reputation. Then you throw in Penn State's best defensive player is not going to play. And the one thing that Penn State does really well offensively is what Notre Dame does best as a team. If you put down on a list of here are the things that they do really well, stopping the run is what they do best. And that's what Penn State is going to want to do. So they are going to be, in my opinion, in situations somewhat regularly where Drew Aller is going to have to win them the game. It's going to have to win them the play. It's going to have to win them the drive. And I don't have enough faith in him or the Penn State offense against that Notre Dame defense to get that done consistently. So give me Notre Dame in a 28-10 win where this final score, despite an 18-point difference, might not tell the real story. It might not feel as close as that score indicates, and that score doesn't indicate that it's close. I just think Notre Dame's playing at too high of a level that Penn State either hasn't matched just quite yet throughout the college football season, or just frankly isn't able to match with how they're constructed right now. I want to hear your thoughts, your predictions on the Orange Bowl. Penn State, Notre Dame. Who you got winning? What's the score? Let's see them in the comments down below. That'll do it for this episode of the Daily Huddle. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review, please. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. And I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.